All right, so welcome again, everybody. Tonight, we're pleased to welcome back Anthony Barrila from the Runway Recovery, and we're very excited to also welcome his mom, Candy Lionetti. Candy is a mom to polar opposite sons, Anthony, who is 30, as well as a 17-year-old son, and a wife to a very socially committed husband. She also has a career of her own that she is dedicated to. You may recall that when Anthony visited with us last, he shared his journey with his addiction. Tonight, we're honored to hear about that journey from his mother's perspective and how she managed her life, full life, alongside the struggle. She called it humbling, hopeful, helpless experience. Welcome, Candy and Anthony, and we thank you for being with us again tonight and also for being willing to share the hope and heartache that we all understand so well. So, with that, we're going to turn it over to you guys.
All right. Well, again, thank you so much for having us here. I'm glad to be able to do this again. When I talked to talked to Sue and you guys a couple of weeks ago about what to do for the next one, I just had the idea of bringing my mom on. Thought she'd say yes, but I wasn't certain, and I just thought that especially for everybody that's in here and in the family side of things, having her perspective on the story that I gave would just be, it's really the full circle thing. And
Right.
um, just to give a very brief overview from my perspective to kind of lay the foundation for everything that I'm sure my mom will fill in the gaps on and give her side is went from, obviously in my addiction, which lasted a number of years, even before it was real bad substance abuse. I mean, it was the same behaviors from when I was a kid. Obviously we had a really tough relationship and there was a lot of tension and just so much stuff, and we'll get into more. But um, now, with me being sober 7 years and a month, it's like we have what I think is an incredible relationship,
Mm.
and things have just changed so much, and from both sides. And I just wanted to share that little bit of hope there, and just kind of lay the foundation like that. And um, Mom, I'd love for you to kind of talk a little bit, because a lot of the people here again have already heard my story, but just your perspective on everything.
Yay.
All right. All right. We're good now. Again, I'm so sorry about that. But when I just had dialed into, you had made a comment or just related to everyone's experience is so individual, right? And that is why I love being a part of this tonight because as Anthony said, our relationship is amazing now. And so it is so important for, I think, other people to realize you can get to that point, right? And it's fantastic to be able to, consider him as a friend and to see as a son, how he has grown and moved past some of that stuff and turned this all around. And he's really, vested in helping other people. Um, I love that. And, I love that we have a great relationship now. I can tell you that there's definitely been, lots of ups and downs.
We lost you again just for a second. Not everybody has perfect Southern California internet.
I know.
Well, she's trying to get it figured out again. Last time I was here, I had talked about a couple things. In particular, I think I mentioned one of the really rough parts. So up until I was about 22, I had been living with my mom, my stepfather, and at that time, my very young brother. I think he would have been six years old at the time, about then. And
That
they had known I was
I'm back.
struggling.
That's correct.
You're back? Okay, good. I'm
Yep.
just telling a little story to kind of start things, give a place to go from. Um, when I was around again, when I was around 22, I was still living with my mom on and off. I hadn't been to treatment or anything at this point. Just about everybody in my life, especially family, really knew I was struggling and knew the kind of stuff that was going on. But it hadn't been, thrown in people's faces yet, in terms of how bad it was. Um, I remember coming home one night after I had just totaled a new car that I had gotten, that I think was one of my mom's last ditch efforts on the side of trying to help me out. She helped me to pay for this car, um, the down payment on it, and it was to I always looked at it as she was really trying to say, okay, if we get this together, then you can still get to work. You can still keep, because I had a decent job, nothing great, but at least I was showing up and doing something productive. And she was helping me out with that, and I had got it after getting in an accident with a previous car that was kind of a hand-me-down lemon. Um, I got in another car accident with this one, and I came home and I was in a place of, kind of panic. I just got this car, I crashed it. I keep in mind at this point in my life, other than that kind of okay job, I really didn't have much. But I remember getting home and to tell my mom that I totaled the car and this would happen last night and all this, and I was going to try and make up some story of how it wasn't my fault, I'm sure. And first thing she said to me before I even got to that was, I need you to get your stuff together and I need you to go. Um, she had found a bunch of bags of heroin in my room, empty bags and just paraphernalia and stuff like that was left over. And, keep in mind, again, this is the house that I'm living in with her, my stepfather, and most importantly, my little brother that's 6 years old at the time. And clearly I wasn't hiding stuff very well or putting it in a place that, he couldn't get to. And, I'm not thinking about anything like that at the time. I'm just seeing pure fear and fight or flight in front of me, because it's my car's gone. Now my mom's kicking me out of the house. And I just remember saying, like, just yelling and screaming and freaking out and blaming her, yelling at her and saying, I can't believe you would do this to me right now when I need you the most, and all this stuff and all these just horrible things that were coming out of my mouth that I, had since had to, obviously make an amends for and apologize for. And had since saw a totally different perspective, because the reality was that was the first real time that somebody held me accountable for the awful stuff that I was doing. And it started me on the path that would inevitably lead me to actually seek help for the first time a couple months later. Um, Mom, are you here right now? Or are you still going in and out? Still trying to figure it out. Um, and that was really tough for me. That was really, at the time, getting kicked out. And I guess the reason I'm kind of bringing up this story and wanted to talk here, and obviously to get my mom's perspective on it when she's back, but I know so many people have to go through that. I work for a detox now in a residential treatment center, and so often I'm on the phone with parents, or even with the addicts themselves before they come in, that are talking about, doing the blame game and saying, my family did this to me, they kicked me out, this, the other thing, nobody supports me, nobody loves me, I'm on my own. And it's when you hear those things, you realize it's like, that is the absolute hardest thing for a family member to do to the loved one that's struggling, is to hold that firm boundary and to give some kind of hard consequences. The reality in my life was, again, if she just let me stay there and continue and accepted whatever line of crap I was going to give about, I'll fix it, I won't do it anymore, I'll get better, it'll be okay, none of that would have worked. If I was allowed to remain comfortable in that mindset and stay, then it would have just delayed the inevitable. At best, it would have delayed things. If not, who knows what could have happened. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's okay. You can just talk if you can't get the camera on. We'll listen.
It's so I have to say, Anthony brought up a couple points that, you know, um, it was certainly, I did get to the point where I said, okay, I'm suffering from delusions myself, that this is going to be something that, we can fix. So, it was absolutely to the point where I just said, okay, this is, I'm borderline enabling by, you know, not making some drastic changes. Um, you know, Kicking him out was, certainly difficult. And that doesn't come without, as a mom, you're dealing with all those other emotions of, okay, what did I do? What could I have done differently? Where do I go for help? Anthony mentioned his younger brother. I had my son, my younger son too, who was still very young, right? And, I had my husband, I had my job, a very demanding job, right? And so it's trying to balance all of those things, but you can't give up. I think one of the biggest things was, you don't, there's a fine line between saying, okay, if you're going to live your life this way, you can't do it here, right?
Mhm.
Um, versus, okay, what's going to happen if he doesn't have someone watching over him for, those minutes, right? Because it's a slippery slope. And you also don't want to make someone feel desperate where, then what's the alternative? And, I don't want to see something else happen either, right? Um, because his mind just was not where it should be. And, I think that was, also one of the hardest things is just trying to balance, like, my younger son needs me. I do have a husband, I have a job. I couldn't focus on that. And, just trying to help him save his life. But it literally was like, watching a train wreck and, over and over again. Um, and it became very difficult to say it's time that you go. Um, and I can't even tell you just all the things of trying to um, I remember tracking his phone. I remember um, you know driving by where I thought he was staying, just to, okay, like, let me exhale for the next, 10 minutes, knowing that he's okay right now. Um, when he came to us and said, okay, I want to go to rehab, I think he was afraid himself too. Um, and he realized, well, I'm better than this. You know, I can have a good life, and try to deal with some of those inner demons.
I remember that moment. I might have said this the last time in here that I came and I hit a wall, and it was about like maybe just 2 months, 2 3 months after I had gotten kicked out, somewhere around that, when I hit the wall and I ran out of money, and I was I experienced what I thought at that time was enough pain to make a decision and ask for help. And I came knocking on the door at, I don't know, maybe 9 o'clock at night or something like that, and sat down with my mom, my stepfather, Joe, and uh, just kind of started to tell them, like, not details, but just saying, hey, like, I have a problem, I need help. And I swear I remember my stepfather just kind of like looking and kind of giving a half smile of, well, yeah, we know you need help. And
Yeah.
I tell that story specifically more so to other people that are early in the program, recovering addicts and alcoholics themselves, as a more way to say, everybody knows that you're hurting, that you're struggling, that you need help, but we all like to think that we're keeping some facade up. I somehow removed from my mind what I said earlier, that my mom found all that stuff at the house. Like there was no hiding anything anymore, but my mind still thought it's all about control. From the addict, it's all about control and trying to keep your hand on something. And I'd say it was so freeing, and I felt a lot of relief when I got that response from my family at that time. And when I learned that, okay, just because they kicked me out doesn't mean they don't love me or they don't want to help me. They just don't want to help me, and they're not going to help me in the way that I wanted to be helped, which was not going to help me.
Right.
I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that whole thing, and um, it's always so important when people will call me and say, my family doesn't care anymore, all this stuff. I'm like, okay, maybe sometimes, yeah, but tell me, like, what was your evidence that that was the case? What happened? Um, and what I always try and support is, and it doesn't always mean, it doesn't in any way have to mean supporting financially or something like that, because sometimes it always gets tied to that. But like, will they be there in your corner if you are doing the right thing and if you are committed to doing the right thing? Doesn't mean everything's going to be roses and rainbows tomorrow, but just about everybody holds on to at least that little bit of hope that at some point this can change. At some point they might be doing something different. And I'll pass it back to you in a second, but you know and you can talk about things didn't get better after that. I went to treatment, but it didn't get better right away. In fact, it got a lot worse. And I can pass back to you.
Right. Yeah. And that was definitely, a very difficult time. I do remember, when Anthony did come to us and he said that he wanted to go. Like I was saying, you typically, I think that's what everyone would want to hear. But if I can be completely honest, it was still a little bit, I was still unsettled. um and then going through the process of his first admittance, definitely um that was definitely a humbling experience. um First of all, getting him in, because it was a matter of he's he's ready to go, so we have to act now that he's on board. And finding, making sure they had a bed for him, and then getting him there within a certain time, and then it was about 2.5, 3 hours away. And then uh, pulling all the paperwork together, and actually dropping him off, and walking through with the admittance officer, and or admission coordinator, to understand what the steps are. And again, as a mother, not still being sort of paralyzed, as desperate, and almost numb to what had been happening a few years prior. But very hopeful that, okay, I'm going to drop him off here, he's going to be safe, and they're going to fix this. um, because I can't. And so, I have to let that go, that I'm unable to fix it. um, I will tell you that, you know I couldn't talk to him for a couple of weeks. That made me, a nervous wreck. And you just, you see the shape that he's in, and I'm like, is he going to be okay? Because you hear these stories, and it's very scary. And then having him call, and want to be picked up, and saying like this isn't the place for him. That was also quite troubling, to be on the other end of the phone. And just, at some points I would just have to listen. I mean, he would call me at work, and, um, you know, very upsetting. But I knew that, you know, and they would tell me, they would say, okay, this is what he's going to do. And, you just have to ride it out. Um, and, one of the, I think, another one of the most traumatic things that had happened was, He was at the first place that he had gone into was Mountainside in Litchfield County. And Sunday is visiting day. And so after a 2-week period, as long as he's gone through his check boxes, then he can have people come in. And you have to go through like a 2 or 3 hour session of what to say and what not to say and how to react to certain responses that they may have. And um, I remember distinctly, I was kind of like in the middle of the room, and I remember there was a mother way up front, and she was so upset that, this was like the sixth or seventh time that she had brought her kids somewhere. And I just burst into tears because I was thinking, oh my God, is this going to be me? Is it going to be, or is this the place that's going to work? And so I think those are things that, it's important to know that could be the norm, right? And that's okay, but you don't give up.
Right.
And that, it ended up being not necessarily 6 or 7, but in terms of inpatient attempts, including the outpatient programs after and all that, um, ended up being a few more. Um,
Yes.
Mom, I don't know, we talked about it, but what was there any point in any of that you were like, were you holding on? Did I think maybe in some way that the stuff that woman had said in there that brought you to tears at that point, maybe in some way might have ended up being like a guiding light of, okay, maybe it's not the first time. It's not the first time for most people. Did you still hold on to that, or did you get
So honestly, yeah, and
hopeless?
honestly, I looked at it like, okay, that has to be an outlier, right? And her kid doesn't want to change. Like my kid came to me and said he wants to change. Um, and so again, you're just as a mother, and that's why I think it's so important to have these types of forums, because you understand that, these are real people. You're so far through the spectrum. So to find someone that you can relate to that would have the same perspective and experience, um, it's also individual, but it's so traumatic. And I remember when she had made the comment, and I was thinking it was an outlier, but then there were times that, you know, in my mind's eye, I went right back to that setting and that woman. And that, I can tell you everything she's wearing today. I mean, she just made such an impression with her, what she wanted. She was just fed up. Um, and I remember looking back and thinking, I don't want to be like that, but I understand where she came from now, right?
Did you see anything? So, after that place, which I ended up leaving early, um,
Hmm.
you didn't support that at all. You said, no, you're exactly where you need to be. And you didn't
Yep.
get into any of my crazy ramblings over the phone trying to prove to you that I was fixed and that I was better than this and I didn't need to be there. You knew pretty damn well I was exactly where I needed to be. But I did end up leaving. Um, and then I went back. I had some pretty traumatic stuff happen in the meantime, which put me into another position to go back. And um, my story at that point was, some really rough stuff happened after I lost my father to a heroin overdose. I was with him when that happened. If anybody was here, I talked about that last time I did this with the addict's mom. Uh, and that sent me back into rehab a couple times after that. And I got to say, I had a very different perspective than the first time. But at those times, it was much more about I'm just, I felt so down and beaten up that I didn't have any ability to to really want to change. I didn't want to change at that point because the thing that I needed to stop doing was the only thing that was providing me any sense of comfort, that I could grab a hold of. So the next couple times was really going through the motions. I went from being the first time I went to where I, was probably the cause of all problems at that treatment center because I wanted to leave and all this stuff. To the next two times, I was the model client that did everything perfectly, that opened up to a degree in therapy. But, and Mom, I want to ask you here. So, like those times after that, when you saw me, like, was there any difference that you saw in me from those times and the first time to the last time a year and a half later when I actually went to Treehouse, when I actually got clean? Did you see any different in
Yes.
me?
Yes. So, and I'm glad you bring that up. I will tell you that both Joe and I, when you were at the place just before Treehouse, you had called and we did, like a conference, and it was maybe, 20 minutes or a half hour. And when we hung up the phone, we just looked at each other and said, "Oh my God, Anthony's like, that's Anthony." It was like suddenly you were back, right? Um, and that was absolutely amazing that, we could just, you were there again. You had sort of, come back around. Um, and then, it was shortly before you came back home, which I think was a huge part of the problem. And you had come back home, and then I remember we were standing in the kitchen one day, and you know, immediately, like I saw that behavior back, um, and I said, "Okay," and he slipped away. He's gone again.
Hmm.
But absolutely, there are, if you stay in tune to it, you can certainly see those glimpses to, recognize the kid that you have. He's in there.
What about, and then, it was just that story you brought, then it was a couple more months until I ended up going to Treehouse. Um, what did you see, or how did you handle it emotionally in that period of time? So I guess what I'm saying, so you saw that when I was at that place in Florida.
Yes.
You saw, okay, it's back, but now, okay, you're back right to the same stuff again. Now you're leaving again to go to treatment. What was your emotional place like that? At that point, was it just, all right, let's bide our time and see, or was there, like, what was that like for you in that last time?
Yeah. So sending you across the country was slightly different than sending you, driving you a few hours away or having you somewhere on the East Coast. So there was that whole piece of now, if something is wrong, or if he leaves the place, he's going to be, on the other side of the country, and, just physically, how am I going to be there? Um, or how long it's going to take me to be there. And it was the comfort that I received from the two guys that I spoke with. And, it took a few days to get you in there. Um, but there was a totally different approach from them. But still you're hesitant, right? Because it's, you have post traumatic stress disorder on some level, right? And I do remember driving you to the airport in a snowstorm, and, you know, texting with, one of the guys, and they're like, they said to me, you have to make sure he gets through security, because, maybe he'll just run off, right? So just make sure. And so I remember, standing there with you, and you were on board with it. And then, he called and, I texted him. I said, okay, I'm watching him. He just walked through. He's on the other side. And he said, okay, good. And then he said, oh my gosh, he's calling me right now. And so it was like, you know, you follow through with those steps. And there was a piece of my heart that was like, okay, I have to trust the process.
Yeah. Yeah. And
But those were
obviously,
sleepless nights after that, for sure. Again,
Oh, absolutely. And
yeah.
I think if it's okay with y'all, Kenny, I know you're not on camera, but I'm going to put myself back on camera. Um, since we've reached this point, a lot of the things you said, I know I keep checking them off in my brain, the things I've said and done and thought myself. But if other people have a question, y'all can type them into the chat box, and I'll get them to them that way. Um, but one of the things you touched on when you said, well, first, Anthony said that people tell him a lot, my family's given up on me. They don't want to have anything to do with me. I hear that a lot from my son. But when he came back, Candy, and on his
Hmm.
own 2 months later, right? And he said, I need help. That is
Hmm.
something I have never heard from my son. Okay. It's
Hmm.
always been kind of pushing him, pushing him, pushing him, and trying to stand close to those boundaries. But when he came back to you with that statement, to me, that's a difference in what I want to achieve, because I don't really like this word, but submission,
Yes.
where he is owning it, he's taking it, and he's taking that step. And and Anthony, to you, when there's, do you have any idea as a percentage rate, people who did like you did, stepped up, say, I need help, right? I cannot do this anymore. And versus those people who are kind of pushed into it, what the success rates are.
I can't give any kind of exact. I can just give what my like putting a number on it would just be me making stuff up. But I can
Hmm.
definitely put just from the thousands of people, through admissions process over the last 6 years that I've been doing this. I have seen both of those situations work, and I've seen both of those situations not. I mean,
Fail.
like to talk about me there, I mean, in that first situation when I went and said I needed help, it's like I just wanted to not be sick. I knew, and when that comes and the physical stuff comes, it was more than that. I don't mean it as it was solely there, because but at that point in my life and what I've seen a lot of other people, any negative emotion or feeling or physical part, it's all wrapped up in the same thing. It's just, this is bad. I don't want this. So me seeing the end of my road and okay, like there's going to be a lot of what ifs. We call them what ifs, not, or sorry, a lot of whens, not nevers on the other side. All the things you say, I'll never do that. I'll never do that. I'll never do that. Those walls were starting to break down. My boundaries that I had set for myself were starting to break down. So there was panic, there was fear, there was, I just did some stuff to be able to get money that I am not happy about. And I screwed people over and started doing those things that morally it's like I'm not okay with. And when that happened, and then I was still at the end of I still had nothing to show for it. That's when I came and I was like, this is all bad. And I can say sincerely in that moment, I thought that I was gonna be done. I did not, I came thinking I am never gonna touch this stuff again. But I also didn't have any grip on the part that alcohol was the problem too,
Right.
that I couldn't drink. I had just put it on that. And then even more so than that now I'm three treatment centers away from realizing that it's not the drug or the alcohol that's the problem. I'm the problem.
Mhm.
So that
Right.
that realization came even later. But I really meant it. And then again, back to your actual question with other people, I have a bunch of good friends now that are in recovery. Some of them that money was not an issue for them. They didn't have the same problems as me, but they still reached a point where they were like, I cannot do this anymore. It is destroying me. It doesn't happen as often. There's almost always, probably in 90% of cases, to throw a number at it, that there is some outside push, at least in
Mhm.
some degree. at least something like what my mom did, which was, even though she didn't grab me and say, you need treatment, you're going to treatment, come, we're doing an intervention, she started breaking down all the things that were making it easy and more comfortable for me to stay in that. So
Right.
I still had push, but not an intervention, let's say. And
Hmm.
a lot of those, I will say, there's some people that are really good at it. Sometimes it works great. A lot of those intervention type situations where it's just the one time, get everybody together, I don't see that work very often. I do
No,
see it. It does work sometimes, not very often. The types of situations like that that I do see work are ones where it's, whoever you're hiring or whoever's doing it is actually sticking with the person long term and expecting them to fail, not from a pessimistic place, but from a reality of, just because this might go well and we're going to get them into treatment right now, my job doesn't end there. I'm going to follow this person and be a golden thread in their life until some of those realizations that started to happen for me down the line start to happen in them. Those are the type of, and I hope that answers your question a little bit.
Yeah, and it does. And it leads kind of into what Nancy asked. She said, Anthony, at what point in your recovery did you realize it's not them, but me, you, and responsibility and take responsibility for your actions? And at Candy, she asked, at what point in your recovery were you able to trust Anthony again?
Um, I guess I'll go first.
Okay.
I I don't think that I truly. There's two parts to that. The second time I went into treatment at Mountainside, which was a couple months after the first one, shortly after my father died. At that point, I was taking responsibility, but it was in a toxic way, and it was not in a realistic, in a productive way of, there's things that I can do to get better. It was at that point that I hit a very, I'm not fighting my family anymore. I'm not fighting my loved ones anymore.
Yes.
But it wasn't a, now I'm going to do this for myself. It was a, I'm going to burn out until I'm dead kind of thing. And if I have to go to treatment for a little bit, then so be it. Maybe it'll work, maybe not. At least after the first 10 days, I'm going to feel okay for the next 20. When I got to Treehouse, um, year and a half to 2 years after the first time I went to treatment, it was in that program that I first gained, I guess I could say, the confidence and the true conviction that my life could look better sober. And when I saw what I felt like was these check marks, which were, or landmarks in my future, which were represented by other people that had been there longer than me, or the people that were teaching us, I said, okay, like, these people changed. They're doing X, Y, and Z. So if I do X, Y, and Z, maybe I can get there. Maybe I can feel better and not feel the need to have the drug. I feel like that's the first time that I actually started to take responsibility truly, in a positive way of, okay, whatever my mom's going to do or whatever family's going to do, their support, their not support, whatever I think about it, it doesn't matter. I'm in a position now where whatever I put into this, I can get out of it.
Mhm.
And I was taking those actions. Yeah, I think that's the best way I can answer that. So
That's great.
And
that was about
and
a year
just to
journey.
yeah, and just to piggyback on that, that's that is exactly what had happened, where I knew it was okay once I saw that it wasn't just something he was saying or lip service, and just, these words he was spewing. You could genuinely see that he wanted to do well. He was, you know, he cared about himself, he cared about his future. He was apologizing for things that, he had said or done, um, and definitely accountable. And so when you see that switch in that, again, it's not just that, it's the behavior. It wasn't just his words. And you
It's
know
something
you're.
probably a mama knows, right? A
That's what
mama
I
can
was
always
just gonna
tell.
say. Yes, we are on the same page. That is what I was just gonna say is, and honestly, like, you know your boy, right? And so you know when it's a smokescreen, or it's something is just unsettled, or it is okay, like, I see he's got his head screwed on straight.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's great. Okay, Sue says, Candy, your son is doing fantastic and you must be so happy, proud, and relieved. Do you still have moments of PTSD, creeping fears that you still deal with?
Yes, yes, and I don't think that will ever go away.
Right.
For two reasons, right? So you see, it is, you know, it becomes like a cancer. It's still underlying and it's still there, and so you have to know. I watch for, any sort of triggers. I watch for, any changes, or grievances that he may have, um, and you just you try to help. And that's, I think, also part of the reason why we've become so close, because
Mm,
it's like, we have to trust each other. For me to be honest, to say, in my responses to him, instead of, as more of a friend and as a confidant, instead of, um, like a disciplinarian, right?
mm,
And, dovetailed with that is the fact that, I do have a 17-year-old son, right? And I am in the exact same space that we were in, when Anthony was, in his junior year and senior year in high school. I mean, we're in the same house, in the same town, right? And it is, I have a heightened level of awareness. And, so it's also, getting ahead of anything that may happen there. So it's not just, PTSD and dealing with, Anthony and his situation. It's for my younger son too, um, in hopes of preventing.
hmm Well, I tell you what, you guys, that was the last of our questions, and I cannot thank you enough for being here. I mean, it's we learn from y'all every time we have this type of session. We learn, and there's so many things we do know already, but to hear them be reinforced by real life situations, it does give hope. And
Yes.
that's what I want. I just want to hang on to hope because I think I do believe it's possible when somebody makes their mind up like Anthony did. And Candy, your story's, right along line with ours. And it's so great to hear how you made it through with Anthony and came out the other side, and your relationship's wonderful and he's in long-term recovery now, and such a blessing. And we just wanted to thank you both for being here and sharing with us again. It means a lot to us.
Well,
Uh,
thank you so much.
Well,
yeah,
thank y'all.